What's the story, Morning Glory? What is the word, Hummingbird? Thank you so much for clicking on my channel and for joining me for this review of the Real Housewives of New Jersey, Season 13, Reunion Part 3. Let's get into it. So the husbands come out, which I always enjoy the segment when the husbands are out on stage because they bring a sense of balance, as far as I'm concerned. They bring a sense of balance, level-headedness, and except when Louie is talking. So Andy begins this segment by asking Louie what's up with him wearing no-nose pajamas. Louie says that that's not exactly what he meant when he said it. Of course, he doesn't wear no-nose pajamas. He says that don't sleep in their father's pajamas. It came out wrong. Now, that's going to be a running theme for Louie, that when he gets questioned on certain things that he said, his response is, well, that's not how I meant it, or that came out wrong, or I misspoke. Louie says, to me, it seems like Louie says things just for shock value. He gets caught up in the moment, and I don't know if he thinks he's in a movie. I don't know if he thinks he's on a scripted television show. I don't know what's going on in this man's head, but he gets caught up in the moment when he says certain things, and it seems like he's saying them for shock value or to appear more interesting than what he actually is. Joe says that he does want to believe Louie, but every time he does, Louie burns him, because Louie had said it wasn't pajamas that I was wearing. It was an old sweatshirt that belonged to No, and I wanted to wear it. Either he said to feel closer to the family, feel closer to I don't know what he said, whatever it was, whatever excuse was for wearing the pajamas and the sweatshirt, it sounded creepy as hell. It creeped me out. And how Teresa can, hear these things and not feel some kind of way, I don't understand. Then we move on to Frank and his relationship with Dolores, because I think Frank was asked, are you having a hard time letting Dolores go? And Frank explains how his feelings for Dolores are completely platonic. It's not romantic. It's not sexual. It's not like he's pining for her, wanting her to come back to him. It's just that he says Dolores and him are family, and he has this special bond with her, a special love. We understand what it is. We get it, Frank. You don't have to really explain yourself. My whole issue with Frank and Dolores was I didn't want Frank to feel bad because Dolores' new boyfriend, Paul, wanted some boundaries. I didn't want him to feel like he was losing Dolores. I didn't want him to be down in the dumps, because the dynamic of his relationship with Dolores has changed slightly upon her dating Paulie. I just did not want Frank to feel sad or depressed or to feel some kind of way, because he wasn't going to have that direct access to Dolores that he normally would. And he says that him and Paulie are now really good. Paulie even confirmed that. He said, yes, me and Frank were doing really well now. And I'm glad, because I understand that whoever dates Frank and Dolores, they have to kind of accept them all together as a package. And Paul has done that. He just wanted to kind of tweak it a little bit. And, he didn't want another man having as much access to his girlfriend as he did. And so everybody's respecting each other's boundaries. Everybody's getting along, and I love it. Moving on. Oh, by the way, Frank and Brittany have bought their own house. So Frank has finally moved out of the home with David. Thank God. So now we move on to Pool House Nabil. He says that he picked a profession that wasn't really suitable for family life, because they asked him, what is going on now with the situation with your family? Are you spending all of your, spending all this time in the pool house away from your family? Are you trying to bond with your children? Whatever. Nabil says that, he works really hard so that to keep his wife happy, keep his family enjoying a certain type of lifestyle. So he puts in very long hours, and he wants to decompress, but it's not as bad as the way it seemed. Well, the way it seemed is how y'all presented it to us. You made it seem like Nabil comes home and goes straight to the pool hall. Frank comes home, bypasses the family, and goes straight to the pool house. They made it seem as if Jennifer felt alone and abandoned in her marriage because her husband Nabil was not present. But of course, at the reunion, after they've watched it back and they realize how they came across, now they're going to try to tweak it and be like, oh, it really wasn't that bad, y'all. Our problems really weren't that bad. He wasn't spending that much time in the pool house, just a couple of minutes before he came back. Whatever. So Nabil says that he has improved as a husband. Of course, he's going to say that at the reunion, because Jennifer probably gave him a really good talking to and said, hey, when we get to this reunion, you need to make it look like our marriage is perfect, because that's the kind of That's how I'm presenting our family to the public, that we have the most perfect marriage. We're head over heels, deeply in love, and we have no issues in our marriage. Moving on from there, because during the season, of course, they're going to make it look like they have problems because they need a storyline. But then when the season is over, now they want everybody to believe, hey, look, everything is wonderful now, hunky-dory. We don't need counseling. Nobody's in the pool house anymore. We're happy. We're perfect. Everything is wonderful. Moving on from there, we have Paul. So Paul, they asked him about marrying Dolores, and he says, well, Dolores really doesn't want to get married. And Dolores kind of looked at him like, what? We know Dolores wants to get married. But he is still married to his ex-wife. They're still legally married. They've been separated for 14 years. My feeling is that I think Paul and his ex have not really gotten a divorce yet, because I think there's some type of money situation going on where maybe he doesn't want her to get too much of his money, or she doesn't want him to get too much of her money, or there's something going on where they don't want the other to have. And I think that's why they've kept it the way they've kept it. I think maybe the divorce might get ugly when it comes to the separation of finances and assets and stuff. So maybe that's why they haven't got, that's my personal opinion. I could be 1,000% wrong, but that's my personal opinion of why they are still married. They've still been married for the past 14 years. He also tells us that Dolores is the first woman that he has allowed to be around his children, which is a good sign, because I don't want Dolores to get hurt. I don't want Paulie using Dolores. I want him to do right by Dolores. So hopefully he'll get that divorce and they'll be able to get married. Now, another reason why they need to get the divorce is because if anything happens to Paul, Dolores, and especially if him and Dolores, have this life together and they continue being together for years to come, you don't want Dolores to struggle, to get stuff that might be entitled to her, because the wife is going to automatically get it because she is the legal spouse. So if he wants to protect Dolores while he's here and after, you do the right thing and get a divorce, Paul, or revise your will. Moving on from there, we have Frankie and Louie. So they talk about the situation with Frankie Jr. and him working for Louie and exactly what happened there. Now, in the last episode, they kind of alluded to what might have happened. They showed us a clip that was filmed during the season, but I guess it didn't air. And it was a conversation between Joe Gorga and Frankie talking about exactly what happened. Now, they made it seem as if 1 minute Frankie was working for Louie and the next minute he wasn't. Something happened. And I don't know if the company disappeared, if Louie disappeared, if Frankie's paychecks disappeared. I don't know what happened. But something happened. And so I was looking forward to part 3 of the reunion to get more information on what the hell happened to Frankie's job when he was working for Louie. Well, Dolores shut that all the way down. Dolores did not want this talked about at all, and of course Frank Catania was going to respect Dolores's wishes, and Joe Gorga was too scared to speak because Dolores was like, we're not going to talk about my son. Dolores wants to keep it copacetic with everybody. She doesn't want to get, because she knows how Louie can get real messy. She knows how Louie gets down, and she does not want Louie's wrath upon her son. Okay, she does not want Louie to take any kind of action against her son, Frankie, if anybody should speak anything that would make Louie mad regarding the Frankie situation. That's my personal opinion. So Dolores was like, we're not talking about that. My son was happy working for Louie. My son is happy now in his new job, and that's where we're going to end it. So we didn't get much information there. And I really do believe that Dolores is afraid of what Louie can do if they try to get down and dirty with Louie about, what happened to Frankie's job. Moving on from that, Joe Fuda asks Louie. He says, well, Andy, I have a question for Louie. And his question was, why did he bring his son's mother, into this whole situation? That question was never answered. And why did Louie have John Fuda investigated? Louie denied having John Fuda investigated. John Fuda says he has the proof. He brought a yellow manila envelope, and he said that he has the proof of Louie investigating his ex-wife and Joe Fuda and whoever else is connected to them. Joe Fuda says that calls were made to the prison. I'm assuming his ex is incarcerated, right? That's what I'm thinking. John Fuda says that calls were made to the prison, and the calls were traced back to Bo Deedle, to Bo Deedle's associates or subcontractors, whatever you want to call them. he says he has the proof that people from Louie's side and Bo Dietl's side were trying to contact his ex-wife to get information on everything, on Fuda, on Rachel, and the whole situation. Louie and Teresa say, well, if you feel like Bo Dietl is behind all of this, then you need to go take this up with Bo Dietl. But okay, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, Bo Dietl was hired by Louie. Okay, he's somehow associated with Louie. So, of course, what do you mean take it up with Bo Dietl? Why would Bo Dietl have any interest in John Fuda and Rachel and his ex-wife? Why would he have any interest? The only people that would have interest in John Fuda would be Louie and Teresa, because they want to know, they want to have, like, which is what I truly believe. At some point at the reunion, Melissa said that Louie wanted to gather as much information on everybody because he's got stuff on him. And so he wants to use leverage with people. Like, don't talk about my mess and I won't talk about your mess. I think that's what Melissa was trying to imply. So this is the reason why it would make sense for Louie to hire someone to investigate John Fuda instead of Bo Dietl out of the clear blue sky waking up one morning and being like, you know what, I need some information on John Fuda for some reason. No, it is all connected to Louie and Teresa. Andy Cohen says, in the finale, you said that you had hired Bo Dietl, and Louie says, I misspoke. Andy Cohen says, well, you also repeated that same statement the very next day when they were at Teresa's house and Dolores was there and Jennifer Aiden was there. And Louie very distinctly said, yes, I've hired a private investigator who's collected information on everybody on this show. Everybody here, I have information on them. Because Jennifer had a look on her face like, oh my God, what the crap? But he says he misspoke. 2 days in a row, he says he misspoke. Moving on from there. Louie says that Bo Dietl hired... Oh, so that at some point of the reunion, Andy Cohen says that he got word from someone in production saying that there was some type of a security team there. And Louie says, yes, Bo Dietl hired security for me and Teresa because threats have been made on our lives. And Teresa said that this is somehow associated with Margaret, that Margaret knows the person who has been threatening her and Louie's life. Margaret is like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. Who is this person? What are you talking about? It's just, this is like an entire circus. Moving on from there. Margaret says that Louie is under criminal investigation for threatening her son. Louie claims he did not threaten anybody. Whoever called her son, Louie says it was that I don't know, whatever that device that a person can use to impersonate that someone else is calling them. Like, you can call someone and you implement this device on your phone or some type of an app, and it makes it look like your mother's calling you, but it's not your mother. It's a stranger calling you. And Margaret believes that Louie either himself or had someone call her son and threaten him, and Louie's denying it. So according to Margaret, they're doing some type of a criminal investigation. I bet you anything, we're never going to hear anything about that again. Frank Catania accuses Louie of hiring Bo Dietl to start a smear campaign against him and Joe Gorga. Louie denied. Louie is like the most insecure person I have ever met. And that is the worst kind of person to be married to, because an insecure man has no boundaries on the things that he will do to appear as if he has confidence in himself. He has no issue with wanting people to believe that he's something that he's not. He has no issue of trying to get rid of problems, things that he feels like are showing his insecurity, or people that he feels like are showing his insecurity. That's the worst type of person to be married to. Joe Giudice was a complete bonehead, but I didn't really sense that he was really insecure. Louie is dripping with insecurity, and unfortunately, Teresa has decided to commit her life to this man, and she has vouched for this man. So no matter what she actually sees or what she actually goes through with Louie, it will never make the light of day, because she has made it her mission in life to present to the world that she's married to the most perfect man, that she has the most perfect marriage. She's got that same syndrome that Jennifer Aiden has. It's like no matter what we're going through in private, no matter how much we're suffering, we can never let anybody know. We have to always put up this front that we are 100% happy. Our husbands are perfect. They're providers or protectors. They're better than anybody else's husbands on the stage, etc. But Louie is dripping with insecurity. He is drowning in insecurity. So I totally believe that he would hire someone to start a smear campaign against men that appear to be more confident, more well established than him. They talk about the whole pizza situation, the pizza business, because Joe Gorga and Louie were going to go into a pizza business together. Somehow that fell apart. They start blaming each other of being deceitful and conniving and whatever behind each other's backs. I don't know what happened. I can't make any sense of it. The only thing that made sense to me was when John Fuda stepped in and said, what should have happened at the very beginning of this business deal, things should have been put in writing. So everybody was really clear on what everybody's role was and what the goal of the business was and what everybody was supposed to be doing. Stuff should have been put in writing at the onset, but that didn't happen. And of course, because they were trying to mend their relationship, their brother-in-laws, let's do it for Teresa. Nothing was put in writing. Everything was done with a handshake. But you can't do things with a handshake with a guy like Louie. With an insecure twerp like Louie, things have to be in writing. So I don't know what happened with that, but this is when Andy was screaming at everybody, let him talk. I mean, Andy was about to stroke out on that stage. He was so frustrated. He let all professionalism fly out the window. He was yelling and screaming. He was damn near cussing everybody out. It was really interesting to watch. Joe Gorga calls Louie a woman abuser. Now, I don't think he means like physically abusing women, but well, maybe he did his ex-wife, because there was rumors that his ex-wife had to call the police on him because he had put his hands on her, etc. I don't know if he's doing that to Teresa, but I do feel like he's emotionally, psychologically abusing Teresa. They talk about if Joe Gorga ratted out Joe Giudice and or Teresa. Now, this is where Teresa steps up and says, I'm not saying that they ratted me out or that they wanted me to get in trouble, but they knew that somehow I would also get in trouble if they got my husband at the time, Joe Giudice, in trouble. Frank Catania, which I thought his bar license was revoked. Well, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't at that time. But he said that he was representing Joe Gorga during this time when the feds had contacted Joe Gorga. And I think that's what he said. The feds had contacted him, or they had asked to speak to him or something. And Frank says, as his attorney, there's attorney-client privilege. I will say this, that my client, Joe Gorga, did not speak to the FBI regarding anything to do with Joe Giudice and or Teresa Giudice. Teresa says she doesn't believe that. Teresa says that she believes everything that Jacqueline Loretta has told her, because Jacqueline Loretta was the one that told Teresa that Melissa and Joe ratted you out to the feds. It wasn't Caroline Manzo. It was your brother and your sister-in-law. So Teresa says, I believe everything that Jacqueline Loretta tells me. And Andy Cohen was like, Teresa, are you serious? After all the trash you talked about Jacqueline Loretta? And Teresa made the mistake of stepping into Teresa land, which is not a real place. It's an imaginary place. And nobody exists there except for Teresa herself. So she made the mistake of saying, I've never said anything bad about Jacqueline Loretta. That's the narrative in Teresa land, that she has never said anything negative about Jacqueline Loretta. So Andy Cohen was like, roll the tape. So they roll this montage of Teresa saying horrible things, calling Jacqueline Loretta horrible names, going in on Jacqueline Loretta, ripping her a new one in every scene. They showed all of that, but that's in the real world. Teresa's world, she's singing Jacqueline's praises. So they show the footage of course, proving Teresa wrong once again. And then, I don't know, they start yelling at each other back and forth, her and Melissa, they're yelling at each other back and forth. And out of nowhere, it was so random, Teresa was like, this is all Margaret's fault. She's the one that ruined the family. takes no accountability, takes no responsibility for anything that she may have done, because they've all contributed to the ruining of this family. All of them have. I don't think that Melissa and Joe Gorga are 1,000% innocent, that they have the cleanest hands. I think they've been rolling in the mud with Teresa. They've been rolling in the mud with Louie. They were rolling in the mud with Joe Giudice. They're all somewhat responsible. But then at the end of the day, I do believe that Teresa and the men that she chooses have a little bit more culpability, because I think that with Joe and Melissa, they do have this thing, especially Melissa. I think she does have this thing where she does want to be famous and she wants to have a certain status, and kind of like she'll do almost anything to kind of be there. But I think with Teresa, she does things out of like pure hatred. She does things out of malice. Like she's out to get people. And I think with Melissa, she really does things. I think she does things in reaction to Teresa. But then she also has this thing where, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know. They all have dirty hands. Okay. They all have dirty hands. But I think with Teresa, it's more so the actions that she does is more so from malice and hatred and jealousy and envy. So they talk about the Melissa rumors, Melissa cheating on Joe Gorga. And Andy asked Louie, because, Teresa, I don't got nothing to do with that. I had nothing to do with that. So Andy asked Louie, well, why didn't you also invite Melissa when you invited Joe Gorga? And he was, I don't have an answer for that, Andy. Of course you don't, because it doesn't make any sense. So they had invited Joe Gorga to come over. They told Joe Gorga, your wife is cheating on you, not just with one man, but with multiple men. Joe Gorga, of course, didn't believe it. And Louie and Teresa said, well, we didn't believe it either. We didn't believe the rumor either. We didn't believe that Melissa was cheating on Joe Gorga. Of course they didn't believe it. But they wanted this rumor out there. They wanted to perpetuate this rumor. Whoever told them this, wherever they heard it, it doesn't really matter. They wanted this rumor to be out there in the public because they want to make Melissa look bad, and they want to destroy Joe and Melissa's marriage. So they wanted to perpetuate this rumor. Now, their reasoning for telling Joe Gorga, Louie said, because we wanted Joe to jump ahead of the story. What are you talking about? Are you like, is this an episode of like the New Jersey version of Scandal? Like, what are you talking about? Jump ahead of the story. Sometimes I really do believe that Louie thinks that he is starring in the New Jersey version of the show Scandal. Jump ahead of the story. We wanted him to be on top of the story, to control the narrative, to not be surprised when the word got out, when this rumor got out that his wife was cheating on him. Whatever. It was a big fat fail, because Joe Gorga didn't believe it. He really didn't give a damn. Melissa didn't care. No, because it was all lies. And they claimed that they heard it from Laura, Margaret's old or ex-best friend, that Margaret had told Laura that someone had told her that they had seen Melissa kissing some dude in the back of a car somewhere. And I realized that they didn't mention Margaret during this whole scene when they were talking about Melissa and the rumor cheating, the cheating rumor. They didn't mention him. I thought Teresa for sure would have said, well, why don't you take it up with Margaret? Because she's the one that told her best friend, who knows who else she told, but she's the one that passed it on to Laura, that somebody told her that they saw. So why didn't they bring up Margaret during this? Because Teresa really did believe that she made it seem like she believed that it was Margaret that started this rumor. Anyways, moving on. So then they talk about whether or not Gia had said that her uncle could do better than Melissa. And they called Gia to verify if she really said this. Of course, Gia denied it. And then this is when Teresa got triggered by something. I don't know if it was because, her daughter was involved, but she started crying and she quickly exited the stage. So up until this point, Jennifer Aiden, who was sitting next to Teresa, hardly said a word. When they were talking about the pizza business, when they were talking about, whether or not the Gorgas ratted out the Giudices to the feds, when they were talking about Bo Dietl, all this stuff, when the men came out, Jennifer Aiden was mum. I thought she would have been defending Teresa a little bit more, speaking up for Teresa, vouching for Teresa. But it wasn't until Teresa left the stage that we finally heard Jennifer's voice. And Jennifer has said says something about how she really didn't believe Louie hired a private investigator. Joe Fuda tells Jennifer Aiden, believe it, because he did, and I have the proof that he did. Of course, I believe, me personally, Cookie here, I believe that Louie hired private investigators to investigate these people. I don't know if he had the money to hire Bo Dietl, but he hired somebody. Or maybe Bo Dietl did a pro bono for him, but he hired somebody to look up information on people. And I do believe it's because he wanted leverage, like Melissa had said. Anyway, Andy Cohen allows Joe and Teresa. Teresa finally comes back on stage, and he wants Teresa and Joe Gorga to have a conversation, brother to sister, sister to brother. And so he allows them to talk, and it kind of goes nowhere. Frank says that he wants Louie to promise to not investigate anybody. Louie was like, I've never even did. I've never hired anybody to investigate y'all. And Louie was like, and Frankie says, well, okay, if you haven't, I need you to promise me that you won't. And I guess Louie promised. I don't really remember. Louie tries to make it up with John Fuda. So he actually gets out of his seat, because this is when Andy was going to be dismissing the husbands. So Louie gets out of his seat. He walks over to John Fuda, and he wants to shake hands and make up. And John Fuda was like, the only way that I can move forward with you is after you admit that you hired someone to contact my ex-wife in prison. And Louie still denied it. He's like, no, I didn't. And so John Fuda was like, look, if you're going to deny it, and I know that you did, but if you're going to deny it, then we can never move on. And that was the end of it. That was the end of the reunion. Really, there was so Andy was like, okay, the final thoughts. What are your final thoughts? Dolores says, you know what, time apart I think is good for everybody. I think she was referring to Teresa and Melissa and Joe spending some time apart, which I totally agree with. Everyone talked about how they want to play nice with everybody else. Oh, I really have no hard feelings for you. I have no hard feelings for you either. I actually really do like you. I like you too. A big old kumbaya moment. But we'll see how true these words are when next season starts, if there will be a next season. We'll see how true all of this making up and, kumbaya, we all love each other, we'll see how real this is when the new season begins. After everybody has had a chance to watch the whole entire season, dissect every scene, dissect every confessional, we'll see how kumbaya we are at that time. I feel bad for Teresa, because she chooses the wrong men, and she chooses men who lead her down the wrong path, and she doesn't realize this. Her children have no power to do anything, even though they're older now. Gia's in her 20s, because they're so busy consoling her and wanting her to be happy and making sure that she's happy, that they really don't have what it takes to tell their mom, hey, I don't know if Louie's a good match for you. They're not going to tell their mom that. They want their mother to be happy. It appears Louie's making her happy, and that's just how it is. Anything that Joe and Melissa do to try to help Teresa's going to take it as hate. She's not going to trust what they say or what they do. She's going to see it as, this is just a form of y'all hating me. Y'all are jealous of me. Y'all don't want the best for me, etc. So there's nothing that they can do either. I feel bad that Teresa and her brother are not getting along still. I think that I do see where Joe Gorga because he says, I will do anything for my sister until this day. If she gets into a car accident, I am running to the hospital to be by her side. And then Teresa, because she's, she took that as, well, don't celebrate me and death, celebrate me. Well, no one talked about you dying. He just said, he was just trying to make a point, trying to use an example to let the world know that I still have love for my sister, that no matter what happens between us and how much we don't get along, if my sister needs me in any capacity, I'll be there for her. He wasn't trying to talk about celebrating you after you died, Teresa. Please pay attention and keep up with the rest of the class. So I do see where Joe Gorga, I totally believe that there's love there for his sister. I totally believe it. I think that Louie is when it comes to doing evil, he's really smart. And he has to walk this really fine balance between making it seem as if he doesn't have anything against anybody, but at the same time, working against them to keep them away from Teresa and to continue to have Teresa believe in his BS and to continue to manipulate Teresa. And at the same time, he wants everybody else to be like, hey, I'm not crazy like Teresa. I'm good with everybody, but not really, because at the same time, he's besmirching them. he's trying to paint them in a bad light, for Teresa to not have trust in them, because he wants to separate Teresa from everybody else so he can fully have control of her mind. And at the same time, he wants everybody to think that, I'm not harming her. I only want the best for her, but I'm also good with y'all. But he really doesn't like them. He doesn't like anybody else on that stage, but he wants to make it look like, I still want to be good with y'all, to make it seem like I'm the good guy, because it's part of his manipulation. I don't know if I made that any clearer. I have no idea. But he's just a bad guy. Bottom line, Louie is a bad guy. I feel bad for Teresa. Heaven help Teresa. They should have a spinoff called Heaven Help Teresa. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. We are done with the Real Housewives of New Jersey season 13. Thank God. Thank you all for joining me in these reviews, whether you only watched one or you watched all of them. From the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you spending time with me. And on that note, on your way out, please do not forget to rate the video. If you like this channel, subscribe to it, please. And I will definitely talk to you later. Bye.